So
Patient, man, you be in this thing.
wait, we'll wait 1 more minute.
There she goes.
Oh, you know, lawyer, too.
Best thing to do is
People support those folks. Right.
Oh, yeah? Good. Glad. Okay, we're going to call the August 26, 2008 North Kingston School Committee meeting to order. So could we please open and start with the call to order and pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could you do a roll call, please, Karen? Right, over here now. Milroy Benson? Here. April Burnell? Here. Larry Cersei? Renee Cockrell? Here. Janice DeFrancis? Here. Kimberly Page? Here. Douglas Roth?
Good evening.
William Brennan?
Here.
Okay. Roll call, calendars, please. Karen?
On the 10th of August, there's an open house at Fishing Cove for grades kindergarten and 1 at 6:30 p.m. On the 11th, there's an open house at Fishing Cove for grades 2 and 3 at 6:30, an open house at Forest Park at 7 p.m., and a Consolidation of Services Committee meeting at 4:30 p.m. at the Town Hall. On September 17th, there's an open house at Wickford Middle School. Right. I was doing September, sorry. See, and I started with September. Wickford Middle School at 6:30. On the 18th, an open house at Davisville Elementary at 6 p.m. And on the 23rd of September, there's a school committee business meeting at 7 p.m. at the administration building. Open house at Davisville Middle School on the 25th at 6:30. And on the 30th of September, no school in observance of Rosh Hashanah. For August, there is, the remainder of August, a CELAC meeting on the 18th at 7 p.m. at Fishing Cove.
For when?
We're past that.
Missed that one.
On August 17th, 18th. Oh, sorry. We're on 26th, and it's the first day of school for kindergarten. We're 12 today. Hope nobody just got that message.
I'd like to add also that September 12th, 13th, and 14th, the high school has a drama production called 42nd Street, that if everyone would like to attend that, they could get tickets, I assume, at the high school. I'm not sure, Karen may have some.
Is there a policy meeting, Kim?
Yes, there's a policy meeting on Friday, September 5th at 9 a.m. here.
And typically, when we went to did open houses, school committee members kind of like align themselves with particular schools. Do we want to do that right now?
I think that's a
Okay, that might be a good idea.
Correspondence?
Please?
Yeah, I think there's a list in correspondence.
Okay, we can do that in correspondence.
No, I'm just saying, it's here, we can, there's a list to work off of.
Okay. All right, we have that list. Quinessa, September 2nd.
I can do that.
Clem,
I'll do that one with me.
Renee, Hamilton,
I'll take Hamilton.
Doug. September 2nd is a
My daughter will love that.
Tuesday. I think I could be able to get to that one. September 3rd is Sterling Lane.
I can do that one.
All right, and September 4th is Sterling Lane, which is Thursday. I may be able to get
I
to
will take one of the days at Stony Lane unless
Okay.
you want to
Fourth now?
attend both.
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll get together on which day.
I can do the 3rd, I can't do the 4th. Can you do the 4th?
I'll do the 4th.
right now.
Okay.
Hamilton is grade 4 on September 8th,
I'll do that one as well.
and September 10th is Fishing Cove, KM1.
I'll do Fishing Cove. It's in my back door.
All
I'll do that
right.
with you now.
Okay, September 11th, Fishing Cove 2 and 3. Remember 2 and 3 there, we were just going over schools, open houses.
Now, if you want to do the 11th, I can't do a Thursday. I could do the 10th if you want to do it that way.
What day is the 10th? The Wednesday?
Yeah, Wednesday. I could do the Wednesday if you want to do the 11th or Thursday.
Thursday's a standing meeting I have, so I can't do it Thursday.
I teach on Thursdays, so.
Somebody wants...
I'm at the Job Corps on
Fishing
Thursday.
Cove, 2 and 3?
Right.
At the Job Corps on Thursday.
Right now that's still open 2 and 3, September 11th. How about September 11th, Fish Forest Park?
I'll take that, Gina.
Yeah. September 17th, Whitfield Middle.
I'll take that.
Yeah, I'll be there as well.
I'll be there as
I'll
well.
be there as
Oh, if you're going
well.
to be there, you can have it.
Davisville Elementary, September 18th,
I'll take Davisville.
right? September
18th.
25th, Davisville Middle.
I'll be there.
And October 2nd, the high school.
We'll be there.
I'll do that.
I think you have a few people.
Anyway. Is it okay if we get home and look at our calendar and determine we can do another one, just to email Karen and, okay.
So we have people there, thank you. Okay. And before we just start presentations, I just wanted to, again, congratulate on behalf of the school committee and all of the North Kingston community, Elizabeth Beisel and her wonderful achievements and keeping us proud of her wonderful achievement, but also her wonderful confidence and demeanor as she presented herself yesterday before all of us at the opening for all the teachers and paraprofessionals and staff of North Kingston, and it was just a wonderful welcome, so we appreciate that very much. And also, Dr. Thornton and I had the opportunity to visit quite a few schools today, and it was a wonderful opportunity to look at schools in operation, first day of school, happy faces, a lot of welcoming, wonderful welcoming staff and teachers, and all of our safety equipment working quite well, thanks to the commitment of the safety committee and the school department in putting that in place. So we wish them a very productive and very positive school year. Appreciate everyone's hard work, maintenance, food service, everyone, administration, teachers, paraprofessionals, everyone that had to get that school door open today and welcoming the children. So we thank them very much. And we now have a presentation. Dr. Thornton.
Good evening. Yesterday morning, I posed this question to the teachers, and I want to share that with you and then hone in on one part of this equation. We're talking, do I need the microphone?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I wanted to pose this question and really share with you what we're doing with one part of this conversation. How do we improve teaching and learning is the question. And to me, it really comes down to assessment and how we use assessment to change our instructional practice. And looking for what's really out there that's working in North America. And I think we found some models that do work, so I'm going to share what we're doing. Typically, in college teacher 101, we do a good job teaching folks how to use curriculum, how to teach the instruction part, how to even give a test maybe, but we fail in most colleges when the assessment's done. Now what do? Most folks do, I teach, I test, I hope for the best, and they go on. We're talking about we teach, then we pause, we see if it's working, take a pulse check, change practice if it's not working. That's the conversation. So really, for the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to be hearing me talking about this. When we're done the assessment, now what? What happens? What works? What didn't work? And how do we get better? Most districts that are finding huge successes are building what's called a balanced assessment system. I won't belabor too much for you, but essentially these are the components. I would submit to you that we have the first and fourth in place. The classroom level, certainly we need to help folks more with teaching and learning in the classroom with assessment, but we have that now. The last one, state testing, we certainly have that, but I would submit to you, NECAP is useful as far as informing us for the future, but it truly is a summative assessment, or what I call an autopsy. It won't do a lot to help the kids in the seats this year. Tested in the fall, results back in February. What are we going to really do to change practice? We need assessments that give us pulse checks, and that's what tonight's theme is. The third one, which you really can't see now because it's green, it's called a benchmark assessment system, and that's something you would give 3 or 4 times a year, identifying the things that matter the most in reading and math with kids. You then have conversations with the teachers, what's working, what's not working, and hone in and get better at those things. Districts that have done this kind of conversation have had huge results. I gave one example yesterday. Las Vegas, Nevada, 303,000 students, 48% Hispanic, big population. They're in the third year of this whole conversation. They outperform North Kingstown. So that's why I want to let you know it is working on a big scale. So these folks are 3 years in, 3+ years. We're 6 months into this conversation, okay? Tonight, I'm going to show you a preview of the benchmark system we're going with. I'll skip that slide if I could. What I wanted to tell you is RIDE, a few years back, promised a statewide data warehouse in which we have built in things like an assessment system we could use and do these things. 2.5 years later, it hasn't happened. Thus, many districts have gone on their own. Ironically, many schools have gone to the same vendor without talking. So right now, launching NWEA is Middletown, Bristol Warren, South Kingstown, ourselves. Now, again, it started it last year, so already it's kind of happening. It's really neat to see. We're talking. But I'm going to show you a little bit about this if I can. And I promise to be succinct. That's not it. That's later. This is something your kids will see. Before students take this is our first year. It's a pilot year, if you will. It's called the Northwest Evaluation Association test. Basically, how is this test different? It adapts to kids. If you get one wrong, it gets easier. If you get one right, it gets harder. It finds a level of student and really hones in on what they're struggling with. What's a MAP? Another acronym for you for the list of acronyms. Measures of academic progress. This company has aligned this test to our GLEs, or our standards. It's custom made for our big ideas in Rhode Island, in New Hampshire, and Vermont. The whole NECAP test process, it's aligned. How does it work? Here's for the kids. You see a computer screen question. You have a mouse. You answer the question, and it builds the test for you as it goes along. It's custom made. Why take it? Well, to find out where we are. I have a chart I wanted to give you, but it's my other office. Maybe I can get it later. The scale they use for this is called the RIT score, and I will get it for you whether it's done. Basically, picture this. Student takes a test. RIT's the guy's last name made the scale, by the way, RIT. You have a score of 160. You'll give you 6 math problems this student got correct. 6 kinds of math problems. A fractions one, whole numbers, whatever. Here are the kinds of problems he got right. It also gives you a norm. Here are the kinds of problems a third grader should be getting right across the country in terms of where they should be. So parents and teachers can now see, here's where the kids are, here's where they should be, and then we can change our instruction while it's happening that month and go back and test it again until we can see if we're getting better. It's that kind of like doctors in a room with a patient. Is the treatment working? No, it's not. Well, change the treatment. That's what we're talking about. Historically, in education, we're reluctant to change the treatment, I think. We kind of keep chugging along. So that's what we're trying to get at. And I'm going to skip that. Here's what the screen looks like when the kids take it. Joe Smith, he would start the test. He would push the screen. Like I said, I'm not going to go into too long for this. There are math questions, such as this. It's a simple click kind of answer. A calculator is provided in some cases for some of the questions. There are reading questions, some have scroll bars, and that's a good test reminder for any kind of situation. Now, to end this today, I thought we could have some fun. Now, let me see if you're all smart as a 5th grader. We're going to try this. Okay? No pressure. I'm not going to call anyone in particular. We'll do it as a group. Okay? But I will tell you. Hang on. Okay, I got to get this.
No, I'm not
My glasses takes a minute. Here it is. This is the test demo, if you will. And we have a free site. I said type in the secret password. Hang on. It's training and training again. This is what the proctor will do in each class before the kids come in. We pick a test. We'll pick math. We have 2 types of tests. You can pick the survey test, the short 20-question test, or the full battery 50-question test. We'll do a full battery 3 or 4 times a year. But for this argument, this conversation, I'll give you the short version, okay, and I'll go kind of quick. So we're going to go with the short test. And add. We're going to pick grade. We'll go grade 3. How's that? No pressure. Benny Moose, student. And now it's building our test for us. It's making a random test, and it'll react to what we say, what we do. Benny Moose comes to the computer. He walks in with his grade 4 math class. They sit down, and they begin. The first question. Anyone can shut these out if you want. I'm just going to go through kind of quick.
Okay? I'm going to get a couple wrong if I can, and to show you a sense of what happens. Which one's biggest? I'm going to say 5. Okay, which girl has the most money? Let's say Ada.
Another intern.
97 plus 63. 12 plus. And also, this test is neat because if you go too fast, I'll do the whole thing for you. It stops the test and says, this person went too fast, it's invalid. So a student can't sit down and just keep doing this. It'll stop, you'll flag you and tell the teacher he did something he shouldn't do, he or she. So now look at this now. That's probably what, first grade? We're down to first grade now. Okay, scrolling down. Okay, let's go 4. Let's get that right. What's it unfolded? Let's get it right again. How much money is in this pocket? What do you think?
65.
Here. Is it getting harder now? Number of push-ups. Now, there are 20 questions. The last one now, why don't I do this? We do this kind of fast, kind of random, not too, let's go number 20. Here we go, right? It shut me down. I finished too fast. It took me 1 minute and 12 seconds. It's known for much more than that for a student. It said basically you're invalid and you're going to do it again. So it won't let you do that. If you did it correct, it looks like this. Let me show you what it looks like. Print that. We want to exit. If you do it correct, you get this. See these sub-scores? Number sense, estimation, reasoning. Those numbers, 203 to 217, that's on that big spreadsheet, if you will, a whole continuum from the very low to the very high. So some parent says, my son is gifted. We can say, well, great, let's take the NWA and see where he falls on the spectrum. If he falls within the same grade level that he's in, well, maybe let's rethink that. But if he's 5 grade levels above, well, let's have a conversation about where he's placed. This kind of helps put a framework on what we're talking about, where usually we don't have a good reference for where we are, what we're talking about. That's kind of what they give you. And if I could, just one more. This gives you, that's a demo. He talks to you. We're not going to do that. But the report you can get, here's the neat thing. I want to show you this, if I could. This tells you, it broke out the class into different RIT scores. You can see that. So the teacher now can go, okay, all my kids took this. These two go together, these go here, these go here. So now she can differentiate her classroom for, okay, this group needs more fraction support, this group needs more decimals. I might let's group them for the day, maybe have teachers switch for a day. All kinds of possibilities arrive with this conversation. So that's what we're trying. It's being launched in September. It's brand new. We're training the proctors September 5th. The first testing cycle is September 25th, maybe give or take. And it'll be the first time through, a few bumps. But it really is a good thing, and it's just part of a whole assessment conversation. I know you're all going to ask, how's it paid for? I'm going to tell you. Partially grant funded, and one line in my budget that was maintained last year called an assessment line. I used that line, and Title II and Title V to pay for it. So it's a pilot. It goes well. We have 60 licenses at the high school to use for grade 9 to kind of have the conversation. If it goes well, we might go higher into the high school, grade 9, grade 10. But it's not cheap, $13 a student. But Narragansett really has some good results with it. Middletown is really excited, Bristol, etc. So that's the infomercial, and you'll hear more about it. I'll probably give you some info after we get the first round of assessment scores to get back to you, tell you where they are.
Is that per year, 13 a year?
Yes, every year, a licensing fee due in July, summertime, $13 per student for a full-blown assessment package. Yep. And as far as how does that rate to other assessment programs, they vary greatly depending on what it is. But that's in the ballpark of what they are. Yep.
Will they all take the test at the same time? Because that tells me they would need a computer, everybody in the class.
We have a assessment window. Tests are normed. They kind of say, from this date to that date, kids taking this test are all in the same strike zone across the country or across Rhode Island as far as GLE knowledge. So we have a 3-week test window. Within 3 weeks, I'd say, when that's it, any 4th grader has to get to a lab in 3 weeks. So they're going to make a schedule up. Each building has a good computer lab. It's a web-based system. It goes right in the web system. Each night you just upload the finished test, then we get reports back the next day. The next step is teachers get together and talk about the results. What's working, what's not working. If we have one teacher that's really running far ahead of others and all kids are equal, have them share what they're doing with the other folks and really have a conversation how it's working.
You indicated in your third slide prior to this one that NECAP was a summative assessment, but I believe the Board of Regents is looking at putting a third of the,
They are. It's very disturbing to me. Being assessments, what I do most of the time, what I enjoy doing a lot, is 5 years ago or so, we talked about we're now going a different way. In most states now, I saw last week some article that states are rethinking the high-stakes test. And here we are talking about adding value. So we spent 5 years building 36 different versions of a senior project. First, we didn't pick one, we picked 36. Now we have it in place for the first year, they're kind of devaluing the project and saying, well, that's great, but now the test is 1/3. It's really not a good conversation. I think it's politically motivated, and it's hard to kind of see that happen.
yes, Doug.
Correspondence. Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll open up now to citizens' comments, please. Would you please state your name, address.
Lights on here.
Social Security.
Richard August, 79 Apple Tree Court. Madam Chairperson, in your last meeting, I think it was June 28th, Dr. Thornton announced that a district-wide handwriting method was going to be adopted that was developed by a former faculty member here, Georgia Tupperwine. Mrs. Tupperwine has kept up a correspondence with my wife and I, basically because she had both of our boys at Forest Park Elementary School, and her husband is an Air Force veteran, and she was well aware of my oldest son's interest and desire to become a pilot in the Air Force. So we have kept correspondence with her. I did send her a note talking about Dr. Thornton's recommendation. I'd just like, for the record, to read a very brief reply that we got. It's only a couple of sentences, if I might. And Mrs. Tupperwine wrote, "Dear friends, your letter made my day. It's nice to know that my name is still included in the North Kingstown school system. Many of the teachers have told me that the teacher's manual was a great help to them. Most colleges do not give any instruction in teaching handwriting. I wish it were possible for me to go into the schools and show how geography, fact and fiction, poetry, grammar can be integrated with penmanship, and my kids always loved it." I could go on and on. Mrs. Tupperwine is 85 years old, and she and her husband Clifton just celebrated their 65th wedding anniversary. They now live down in Boring, Texas. So she was very pleased to know that. I wanted you to know that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At the last meeting, I watched the meeting on the archives, and there was some discussion at the end of the meeting regarding the health insurance collaborative that the school department is involved in. When Mr. Draper was seeking a disbursement of something like $189,000, and there was some question as to exactly how that would be handled. Putting on my other hat now as a member of the audit committee, I'd like to take a moment to try to clarify how that will be accounted for. That payment is considered to be a prepaid insurance expense. It will be carried as an asset, basically, on the balance sheet of the school department. The advance payment represents a reserve fund, if you will. And although I think Mr. Draper said you get it back in 2 years, that's probably not going to happen, and the auditors will make a footnote to that effect. The deposit premium is not an expense. It is going to be an expenditure, but it is not an expense. It's carried on the balance sheet. And every year, the collaborative will give you, I think it's a calendar year, it might be fiscal year, a statement that says this is the remaining fund balance. It may go up, it may go down, depending on how much you've paid in for premiums and what the experience is. It can go negative. So you might get a report that says you are now in the red on this, and the school committee will have to scramble to find a way to make that up out of that year's budget. Because effectively it says you've underfunded your liability for medical insurance that year. So it is not an expense, and we carry it as a deferred asset or prepaid insurance item for accounting purposes. Okay? Okay. This leads me to the third point I'd like to talk about, and that is something that was also discussed at the beginning of the last meeting, and that is the workers' compensation self-insurance fund that the town carried. Earlier this year, I think it was January or February, Mr. Roth, acting as a private citizen, and several other people came to me and asked me to ask the audit committee actually to take a look at the accounting for the self-insurance fund. And I did have several meetings with the finance director and looked at various documents and analyses that they had prepared. And on April 21st, I sent out a memorandum with some preliminary findings. Dr. Fear was provided a copy, as was Mr. Roth, who was the committee chairman at that time, Mr. Cooney, the town council president, and Mr. Embry, manager, all got copies. After that look, my comment was in a 3-page memorandum. The important comment is that the accounting for both the self-insurance fund and what was being called the offline reserve was thorough and allocations were reasonable. The premium split was based on payrolls, and the school district's disbursements were much higher than the town's due to many long-term disabilities and several employees who were paid settlements who did not return to work. The conclusion was that although the balance in the self-insurance fund allocated to the school district may be understated, there is not enough of an overstatement in the other 4 entities' balances to make up the difference. That self-insurance fund covered the town, the school district, the free library, the water department, and the Quonset-Davisville Recreation Department. Those latter 3 are very small, obviously, the school department and the municipal government being the 2 largest. I said, in my opinion, no basis that this time was available to transfer any more to the school district from the self-insurance fund. Council President Cooney and Mr. Roth, among other people, took some exception to my comments and conclusions. So during May and June, I had several more meetings with both Mrs. Sunderland and Mr. Embry, and actually went back and looked at the minutes of town council meetings and the minutes of the self-insurance fund committee to see if there was any votes taken on the allocations or any discussions that would pertain to that. I also found several old invoices and looked at the allocations that were made. And again, it was not entirely clear how those allocations were made, although on the face of it, it appears that it was made both on the basis of payroll and numbers of employees, which seems to be fairly reasonable. And I concluded in June that given the fact that Dr. Halley and Mr. Daly represented the school department on the self-insurance fund committee, it seems hardly likely that an inequitable or inaccurate method of allocating charges and income to the school department would occur. And therefore, there's no grounds to believe any intentional or unintentional misallocations were made and no basis for making other adjustments at this time. The bucket of money was fixed. If there was balances in one of the or all of the other 4 accounts that would offset any overcharge to the school department, there would be some basis for looking at that. But essentially, there isn't, and Mr. Embry has stated that the town, as of this fiscal year, one that began July 1st, the town will be responsible for any old workers' comp charges that come up, at no charge to the school department. So I hope that this kind of closes the matter a bit. I know that this is not an agenda item, but I believe your legal counsel is giving you advice that you can ask questions for clarification. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Mr. Roth?
Thank you. Mr. Arbus, thank you very much. It certainly adds clarity to the front end of the process and the way the transactional history was set up. A couple of concerns I've voiced in the past, which I still would have a few questions about, are what happened to the surpluses. As you know, this fund disappeared off of the town radar in 2005. It wasn't listed in the enterprise fund, so regardless of what those allocation histories were, there was a dispersal of surplus funds that went somewhere. And that is a significant question for everybody. That would be one question I'd have. And the other question I have is that in the previous two appropriations to the school committee, to the school department, funds have been allocated from that fund to the school department in the form of our appropriation. The question I would have for the audit committee, this is a question that I've actually said I'd like to raise probably with council or even the auditor general, in case other districts in the state are going through this, is that how can the town appropriate previously appropriated surplus dollars back to us in the form of our appropriation? So while the front end of that process looks like you brought some clarity to it, I still think that the application of those funds, the allocation and the bookkeeping have massive questions that still need to be answered.
Try to answer your question as briefly as possible. I think the way this is accounted for is very similar to what you're now doing with the collaborative. The self-insurance fund built up over a number of years. The term that was used that was like off books or off budget, it was off budget, but it was a reserve fund that was known to the auditors and was being carried on the municipal books. And it's just as the collaborative fund, you'll have to make adjustments up and down as the year goes through, and the same thing is true of this self-insurance fund. The only difference is, in 1999, when no contributions were further required, was because such a balance had built up that there was no point in making any further contributions. In 2005, 2006, and 2007, when they switched over to Beacon Mutual in 2000, the fund in 2005 was removed and so went offline. But when I say that, it was not in the expenditure side, it was now being treated as like a third-party reserve fund. And the auditors were aware of it. It wasn't like this being some secret slush fund that nobody knew about. So beyond trying to prove a negative, which is logically impossible, I don't know what else you could do with it. But we have an audit committee meeting, I think, on September 18th. You're certainly welcome to come because I think that will be an agenda item, so that'd be fine. Anybody else? One more point. At the end of the last meeting, there was some discussion about the COPS program and the bill for the COPS program. I attended the first Citizens Police Academy with the North Kingstown Police Department, and I went back again this year for the firearms training and did a ride-along, and I talked to a number of officers, and I think the one thing that has to be kept in mind is that North Kingstown Police Department comprised of 50 officers. In that 50, you have the chief, the captains, the lieutenant, sergeants, 2 detectives, not patrolmen. Last year, there was 3 school resource officers and 1 DARE officer. So approximately 10% of the patrol force was assigned to North Kingstown schools. And you're quite correct when you say, well, they're not there 12 months a year. But those 40 or so patrol officers have to patrol the town 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They do get vacations, they do get holidays, and they work 5 on and 2 off. So when school is in session, those 4 officers are dedicated to the school department. During the summer, yes, they do normal patrol duties. When they don't take vacation, when school is not in session, they're simply filling in for other patrolmen who are on vacation or sick leave or whatever. So the money, when you talk about 1/3, 2/3 split, I mean, basically it's a rule of thumb that the school's in session from September to June, if you want, mid-month corrections, but about 9 months or 2/3 of the year. And I believe that the allocation to the school department was not done based on the actual salaries that were paid to those patrol officers, because obviously they have seniority in their contract as well. But it was based on the standard charge for detail officers. So it was a bargain. Now, we can certainly talk about whether or not the school department should fund that or whether it should be municipal, but I believe Mr. McGlynn stated that the town council has indeed said that this year they will fund 2 school resource officers. The DARE officer is funded by grant money, so that doesn't come out of anybody's pocket other than the government, I guess, but we're the government now I think about it. So those 2 patrol officers will be assigned full-time, one at the high school and one to cover both middle schools. Is that an ideal setup? No, because if the officer's at Davisville Middle School, there's 9 stoplights between Davisville and Wickford L, and he's not driving a patrol car. I mean, at Wickford Middle. So if there's an emergency at Wickford Middle, he can't get there as fast as the patrol officer can. The reason that Wickford Middle does not have an SRO this year is because the administration of that school said they didn't have the number of discipline problems that Davisville Middle School had. And they don't really need a patrol officer full-time. That's what that decision is based on. So this year the town is going to fund that, and I think that the charge that has been presented, certainly once the audit, as you pointed out, Mr. Roth, once the audit is completed and we know what the situation is, seems like a reasonable charge to me. Thanks.
Evening.
Good evening. First, I wanted to comment. Friday, the dedication of the sign at Sue Hensler, Knesset Elementary, it really was a very nice day. There were a couple hundred kids there. The town really showed what a community we have, and I'll back up the comments of the chairman. Elizabeth Beisel was there, and that girl speaks well beyond her years, and her poise is well beyond her years, and the politicians looked like little kids having their pictures taken with her. And it was great for the Hensler grandchildren as well. I wanted to also comment on Dr. Thornton's presentation on curriculum. It really is refreshing to see this level of focus on curriculum and looking at it as more than high-performing schools, but high-performing students. And I think that's really what you're getting, and his focus on curriculum and testing is I think, excellent. The other thing that I wanted to comment on is, again, Ned's monthly financial update, and also the bids and awards, and the fact that I think there's a lot more transparency in what's going on in the bids and awards, accountability, and that really leads to the fairness question in things. I did miss on the calendar, though, by this time last year, we had several budget subcommittee meetings, and I didn't see any for August or September. And with the financial crisis and probably a supplemental cut could happen from the state, the state's not looking too great. I think it's time to focus on next year's budget and issues. I did want to again this week. There's something on the consent agenda that I don't think belongs on the consent agenda. I think it should be discussed. And that's interscholastic athletic equipment. And when you look at that, there is a controversial item on it. And that item is Speedline equipment from Grogan Marciano. I don't know if you know this, but Speedline is a brand that there's only one organization that's licensed or that has the region, and that's Grogan Marciano. Rocky Marciano and Steve Grogan bought his company. Speedline is not something you saw at the Olympics on jerseys. It's not something I see in the NFL or the NFL, the NBA. It is a very expensive line of sport clothing. Very expensive line. And there have been rumors, and I'm saying they're rumors, that bids have been asked to be withdrawn by local sporting companies who offer Nike, Adidas, and other equipment. This is an issue I'd like to know, and I think the school committee should know, when did we change over to Speedline? Relatively, what is the expense of Speedline equipment versus Nike, Adidas, or the things that are good enough for the Olympics and the NFL? Especially when we're in these times of budget, crises. So this is an issue that I really think the school committee needs to look into. And we keep on having issues where we're cutting teachers, 10 teachers, 15 paraprofessionals. It may be different. I know Dr. Thornton added some people back. But you approved under a consent agenda item last week a $10,000 piece of equipment, football editing software, and under consent agenda this week, very expensive uniforms. And it goes into fairness and it goes into transparency. And there are rumors, and I'll say they're rumors, don't know if they're founded, that local companies have been told to withdraw their bids. So I'd be asking tomorrow, Ned, I'll give him a call on what the bids look like for this stuff for the past couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Pratt at 135 Windsor Avenue. Before I get to the comment I was going to mention, I just want to say that if the president of the North Kingstown taxpayers brings up an item that appears like we may be buying expensive equipment and maybe we could have some savings, I think that would be appreciated by the community after all we've been through for these years, that it actually get looked into in a credible manner and a articulate and credible result come out of this political and administrative process here, and it shouldn't be too hard to do that. I would second his remarks in terms of looking, when the public comes into the process and says, hey, here's something that looks a little bit out of sorts, and brings it up. In the past, you got pushback and you got smoke. Now we're hopefully in a new environment, and we get instead credible answers. And that's all anybody's looking for. And these people are smart enough to tell the difference between smoke and credible answers, and I'm sure we'll get the credible answers, I'm just saying. Mike, really what I wanted to do was ask a question of Dr. Thornton about his presentation briefly, just because I'm curious and I'm not an educator. Basically, the benefit of this $13 per student per year program that you're looking at is that you'll get information about the progress, academic progress of each individual student, plus aggregate information in terms of how whole classrooms and whole schools are doing, and whole grades are doing. Is the benefit that then the teachers in these meetings, when they get these results, will be more apt to remember what they were just up to a couple of months ago that led to this latest result?
It's kind of like real-time changes. So in the past, when I was in school in the 80s, you might take a midterm exam, final exam, or end-of-unit test in maybe 5th grade, and 6 weeks has gone by already. It's already done. Now we can focus on really where are most fourth graders needing support. Maybe it's fractions, maybe it's multiplication of fourth-digit numbers, and we can really hit that hard and change it for all the fourth grade students. The whole difference is, in the past, most school districts didn't have an awareness of doing more, I call them pulse checks, on where we are, what we're doing. It's been more at the end, the summative, how did it go, how did it end out, but we didn't really do much to change it. We kind of went along. This is a change in that. And most school districts that are doing this are seeing big results across all grades when they really get it right. It takes a while to get there.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's a feedback thing where the feedback is beneficial into the classroom process in a sooner cycle. You can start improving it.
Also, kids are involved. Kids will see their scores, and they can tell what they're strong in. And parents see them. Parents get the scores.
Will the lower scoring kids get beaten up by the higher scoring kids by any chance? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, John Urban, 636 Glen Hill Drive. I want to speak to item 6A on the consent agenda regarding leave approval for Ms. Tricia Berry. In my 3 years as school resource officer at North Kingstown High School, I got to meet a lot of amazing people. I never knew anything about education, but the administration, the teachers, and support staff were pretty amazing people to me. As far as the opportunity to have summers off, I'll still work in the summer. I got to know Miss Berry in particular. I found her to be a very, very dedicated teacher. She runs the Art Scholastic Awards for Rhode Island. She even took time to teach teachers how to make ceramic bowls so they could be donated and sold to help fight hunger. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that she's my girlfriend. So obviously me supporting her is bias. So instead of my relation to her,
speaking to you with our relationship, which is taxpayers. We're all taxpayers, and you all received emails. I'm not going to get into, what was in the email to save some time, but her ideas save money. It's immediate savings, and they make sense. It's common sense. If I could take a piece of what Dr. Thornton just said, and jump out and correct me if I'm not trying to quote you, but times are changing with education, so we have to adapt and try new things. I understand in the past you don't want to approve these types of leaves for certain reasons, certain criteria, but I think in this this fiscal problem we're having, times are changing there also. So the way you look at these leaves also needs some consideration. And I just brought a fact I heard on the radio the other day. Unemployment hasn't been this high in the Ocean State since 1993. I don't think we want to add 2 more to the stats. Thank you.
We're good. Nothing to do with the agenda, but is that light safe up there? It looks like it's going to fall on y'all's head.
Touch it.
Thank you.
We want something to
We'll let that one drop, right, Chris?
like we just did. We just did.
Okay, thank you.
I'll take the risk. Make NK spending, that'll be great.
Great. Look, can we go on, please? Thank you, Renee. To routine items, correspondence. Doug?
Got a couple of things. Let's see. Along the lines of North Kingstown athletes making good, Kelsey McQuaid, who's now a freshman at NK High, was selected, and you'll understand this, she made the ODP, which is the Olympic Development Program, for the 1993 National Girls Soccer Team. So she trained over the summer in New Jersey, along with, 1,000 other kids. Was identified by the national coaches and was selected along with another performer out of Rhode Island to join the national team for her age group to go to Ireland and compete. So this is a soccer player, and I tell you, if you ever see this girl, I was amazed last summer, or about this time last year at the middle school tryout, sometimes you hear a certain sound on an athletic field that makes you wake up, and I heard this thump coming from 50 yards away, and it was this little girl pounding the ball with her bare feet into the back of the net. And she's a special little soccer player. I've got a couple other things, but I'll defer to other folks first.
April?
Yes, in correspondence, we have the Lynx annual report. Are we going to be able to freely recognize this, or are we doing this under correspondence?
I think you can understand in subcommittee reports.
The subcommittee,
In subcommittee reports, you can address it then.
Okay, it's kind of at the end of the night. Then I'll just quickly say that this is a phenomenal report, and we haven't had anything like this in a very long time. And I just wanted to recognize it's just a great pool of information, and it just goes to show how vital Lynx program is to us. And so, because a lot of times people leave, they aren't here for the end of the night. But I think it really, in the past, years ago, we actually used to put Lynx on the agenda
presentation.
as a presentation, and maybe we could have Mrs. Pugh come sometime, and so the public can hear what they really do. If we could do that, that would be great.
So is that consensus that we would ask for the Lynx to do a presentation? Okay.
Yes.
Doug?
And we mentioned this briefly earlier, Janice, you touched on it, the kneecap testing moving to the high-stakes element of the graduation requirement. I will submit an article that was written by a local, Tom Seguris. It was forwarded me by several parents who raised concerns, who asked, and Dr. Prince, I sent you a note, they'd like this on the agenda to discuss the implications of it. Dr. Thornton, the immediate concern of everybody are the same concerns that you have, that you got a test that's that doesn't necessarily cover all the material becoming a huge part of the graduation requirement. It is political, it's a serious issue, and there's an event tonight in Exeter, West Greenwich that was hosted by some concerned parents who were raising awareness to the issue, and I think that the school committee should do the same and start to raise it. I mean, if the state wants to go with a high-stakes test, fine, but it's got to be well thought out, well planned, and executed.
I received the following information, and it seems as though there's beginning to be a grassroots organization, and thank you, Mrs. Page, for attending the meeting. I think I read where you attended the meeting, am I correct?
Yes, but I wasn't able to attend it tonight because we ended up having our executive session a little earlier than I expected.
But I just want to say that in reference to that, and I'm very disappointed that with the school committee money that we don't subscribe to the Providence Business News. In yesterday's edition and also today's edition, they were talking about the governor and the commission at things related to this, and also people are sending letters to the chairman of the elementary and secondary education, the director. And maybe we should do that because there's a lot of fear out there. And one thing that I noticed very heavily on the, speaking of athletics, we're paying more for certain equipment in athletics than we're paying for extra duties for the person that's coaching the kids in education. And the thought that came to my mind is, we're here for education. That's the thing that we are required to do by the state. And when we get to this article about the stipends, I would ask each of you to pay attention to it. The stipend we give the coach is twice as much, almost, as to what we give a person to help get these kids prepared for graduation from high school. So that tells me something, that somewhere our priorities were wrong. And this, that you can't bring up nothing, it's not on the agenda. I've heard it clarified 2 or 3 times. We can bring it up, but we cannot take action. And when a citizen speak, am I correct, Madam Attorney?
Correct.
And when a citizen speaks, we can ask the person that's speaking questions, but we cannot take actions until it is put on the agenda. Now, several people have gotten up here tonight and talked that I really wanted to ask some questions, and to the reason of why they are here. And Mr. Urban, would you come back to the microphone? Could you, in no uncertain terms, give me the reason as to why you're speaking? I think I read something about someone being refused a leave. Could you go into that for me?
The question?
Yes.
What's the question?
The question was, what was the guiding principle behind your speaking? We sat down and we went into the other
The
part.
guiding principles were support for a person I care about and worrying about where my tax dollars are going to.
Okay. Was that related to the point that she was refused a leave of absence?
That has not been acted on.
That hasn't been acted on
Okay.
until tonight.
It's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda for action. Okay?
Okay.
Right.
Are you going to stay into that? Thumbs up.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so correspondence, any further correspondence?
A couple other things if someone else does.
Go right ahead.
Got a note from a neighbor of mine today raising the issue of concern that some of the parents noted that there were actually 4 kids in bus seats today. That came off, so just wanted to note, don't know if it's true, something to explore. They wanted to put in writing to see if there was something we could do.
Bus number?
I don't know. Hamilton is to, well, Stony Lane to Shady Road.
Was it North Kingston?
It's North Kingston.
Today, Mr. Rock, this is
I
the
don't want to do
first
it,
of
the
school.
Michigan's not up.
Is this today?
Today. And then also, I think the committee received a note today. I just wanted to say we got it from a member that of the configuration subcommittee, encouraging everyone to take Dr. Thornton's recommendation this evening. I know we're going to be talking about that. Just found it a little frustrating that she's referring to a recommendation that we haven't seen. So I don't know if the subcommittee has seen something, produced something, or if other folks have seen it, but I'm sure we'll get there. And that's it. That's all I've got.
Okay, Renee, I wanted to ask about this correspondence, this legal notice to abutters for the funeral home. Is this something, is this just for information? It was in our packet.
Haven't seen it. We're legal.
It's about the funeral home, I guess they're expanding, but I just didn't know, I've never seen anything like this. I wasn't sure, is this something we have to take action on, or is this just for our information?
Permission is being requested to allow expansion of funeral home and associated parking with variance to required buffers.
That would probably be relative to the zoning. The zoning board requires a certain radius from the property, and as an abutter, we would have interest.
Well, I understand what this was asking for, I just wasn't sure, is this something that we need to take action on, or is it just for information for us?
Just information. If you directed us to protest for some reason, we had a concern, then we would administratively do what you direct us to do. But where it doesn't impact any frontage we have for our operations, it's just information.
It's not even on the same road as our school, so it's not going to take up any of our space, right?
It's just relative to the property proximity. That's the reason they're informing us.
Are you okay with that, Renee?
Oh, yeah, I just didn't know what we needed to do on it.
Okay, just checking. All right, yes, Mel.
I just wanted to add to that, that's the procedure of the town, when we are considered abutters, and they're following out their duty by sending them to us, in case, as he explained, we wanted to do. They're very clear about following town orders and charters.
Thank you, Mel.
All right, so disclosure of executive session votes. Karen?
A motion was taken to reach a settlement up to $5,000. The vote was 5-2 to approve, with Mrs. Benson and Dr. DeFrancis voting no. A motion was taken to approve the executive session minutes of 8/12/08 with a unanimous vote to approve, and a motion was taken to recess the executive session with a unanimous vote to approve.
See. Thank you. Take a motion to see. We're not
done yet.
Yeah, we're not finished. Okay, the consent agenda. Do we have exemptions to the consent agenda? Doug?
I'll exempt F2 for conversation.
Kim?
I was just going to say the same thing.
April?
Yes, I will exempt E1
Okay.
and G6.
All right. Anyone else?
F1.
F1? Other exemptions? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the consent agenda items that have not been exempted.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Let's go to E1, monthly financial update. April?
Yes, just a real quick, I had noticed on there was number 4, a little bit Ned on transportation, and you had commented that the experience is going very positive with the North Kingstown Fire Department. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for all your consolidation efforts for that. This is, a lot of people might not be aware of it, but this is really huge. We had a lot of special ed buses that were breaking down, coming from Providence and all over the park, and we were unable to service these buses to our NK school system. And now, I've got 2 phone calls in the last couple of months about people saying how the buses, especially that one going to Providence that was going up there, is not breaking down anymore. So I just wanted to, there's a lot going on about consolidation back and forth and whatever, and even if it doesn't save us money, or if it does save us money, it was just like really refreshing that we got something accomplished and a good job. So thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to pass.
Wait just a minute, Larry? Is it on this issue?
Yep, just a couple of quick questions and comments under the monthly financial update. Matt, I guess this would fall under you. Transportation. I notice there's a mention of policy and procedural manual being put together for drivers, monitors, paraprofessionals. I know that was a recommendation of the Transportation Subcommittee. Final report was development and implementation of that policy procedure manual, so I'm happy to see that going forward. I guess my question is, there were several recommendations made as a result of that policy, the subcommittee's final report. I guess if from either you or the transportation director, if the committee could just have an update as far as where those recommendations are they recognized? Is it something that we're working on implementing? Something that the administration may not be in agreement with, or they just may be with other discrepancies? So if we could just kind of have an update as far as where those recommendations from that subcommittee are at this point, whether it's through correspondence or. Thank you very much. Just a couple of other positive notes. I just wanted to recognize the work that was done over the summertime, as noted on this financial update on the Woodford Middle and the CD building roofs completed. The security improvements that Dr. DeFrancis had mentioned earlier, audit all the schools. The Davisville Elementary School special needs handicap accessible playground, that handicap accessible surface being completed. I was over there Sunday night. I took a walk around the back of the building to look at the playground and the surface, and it looks great. I'm sure the parents and staff and students were all thrilled, and it's great to see that finally completed. And as well as the energy efficiency rise audit that was done. I think, going forward, with the rising costs of fuel and whatnot and energy, those steps would be imperative to us as we continue forward. So I just wanted to recognize those things that have been, those projects that have been taken on by NED and maintenance and the contractors, various contractors, important projects taken on over the summertime that have been addressed and completed. So some positive steps forward. And one last thing to wrap up, the last item, facilities, the capital improvement plan, that was a result of a discussion we had during a consolidation subcommittee meeting. Matt, if you want to probably explain exactly what we're doing there a little bit better than I can, what the hopeful game plan is going forward with those consolidating the projects between the school department and the municipality.
Yeah, what we're going to try to do is actually tomorrow evening we have a meeting with the Asset Management Commission, and we're going to take a look at our school facilities projects and try to align what the town will be doing with their projects, so that, for instance, if roofing comes up and we have two roofing projects and the town has two roofing projects, we'll try to bid those together so that one company would give us a greater discount, if you will, for doing the same work in the same town. So that's what we're going to try to explore over the next few months to see if we can get those things to align.
So pretty much aligning the timelines of similar projects.
Yes, so we can bid projects and get a quantity discount.
So I just, so often that we address concerns and problems, I just wanted to take a second to recognize some of the positive work that's been done and the good positive work that's been done going forward over this summertime. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I would also let the committee know that Luke Cahoon and John Haran have been key players in getting those things done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Chuck?
One note on the financial report. I notice on page 2 on the revenue report, looks like we've got a revenue variance. We're down about, it's like 0.1 percentage point from the town. I'm just wondering, is that normal? We're down, looks like $81,000 from our appropriation. I'm assuming that's going to be paid out over time. I'm glad you asked. It's a good segue for something I wanted to bring to the committee's attention. Relative to the revenue,
That would be based upon their collections. So after we go through our audit, we'll determine where that shakes out and why. One of the reasons for our revenue differential, if we go to the detail on page 3, Medicaid reimbursement was a substantial piece of that shortfall, as was some federal aid. So that's where the bulk of our shortfall is coming from.
I would expect the federal stuff that kind of happens over time. The town one was new to me. I've never seen that one before. It hasn't happened in a couple of years. So I'm just wondering if that's a collections issue. Maybe Mary Ann, you can. Oh, I got a question. I just want to make sure that the town commits to an appropriation number, right? They're committed to that number. They're going to have to deliver that bottom line, correct?
Yes, but what I'm saying is the projected total revenues, I don't know what the audited final is going to be, but the projected revenues are even on page 3. That looks like they're going to deliver what they committed to. However, for Medicaid and the federal aid, we do appear short. I also wanted to bring to the committee's attention page 4 of the standard report, as you can see, has no entries. I revised that page to what is a page 5, if you will, in your report, and that includes expenditures, and as Audit Committee member August mentioned earlier, there's some accounting rules that go with some of these things, but to keep it simple, we have some anticipated expenditures from our fund balance. And this is something I want to bring to your attention now, because as we progress through this fiscal year, I am uncomfortable that based on utility costs and some other costs, that we're going to be very tight. That said, as we recall going through last year, we weren't sure what was going to happen, and when we received the COPS communication, the town was anticipating some fund balance. So if you go back to page 1, you'll see that we have $438,000 in fund balance anticipated based on this closed fiscal year 2008. Now, if we flip back to this page 5, these are anticipated expenditures against that money. And no, I can't claim to have worked out the numbers so that they work to within $1,000 of each other. But what should kind of grab our attention is that between our commitments, $439,000, and our anticipated fund balance, $438,000, that's $1,000 difference. Now, I do believe, based on purchase orders that'll be closed out and some of the other things that occur in an audit, we'll be okay. We will not go deficit. However, as you can see, we're on a wafer-thin margin. And that, given that last year we spent over $400,000 to balance the budget, this year we will not have that kind of fund balance to bail us out.
I'll follow up with that. Thanks, Ned. The concern I would have is that in the past, our fund balances have generally gone to the school capital reserve fund, where they could. Right, so we were funding capital improvements like the roof at Woodford Middle that we fixed this summer. What I'm seeing here is that we're basically zeroing that out. It's almost going to be virtually impossible to move anything to the school capital reserve fund. So general question, a long-term question I have for administration leadership, of what are we going to do for capital expenditures next year? What's asset management planning to do? We're burning through our capital money, and it doesn't look like we have a reservoir to add anything to it. So I'm going to want to understand what the capital plan is going to look like, because it's going to need money.
I can speak to two basic pieces of advice for that. One is relative to our general expenditures. We're going to want to do all we can to reduce our expenses during the course of this year and as we go through the next budget cycle. Two, as it pertains to our capital investment, I think that we're going to have to consider for our next CIP some kind of bond investment to continue our capital expenditures. At the current rate of spending and need, and you're all aware of this from our last budget, we're looking at about a $5 to $6 million commitment over the course of the next 5 years. We only have about less than $1 million on hand now, so that we're getting to the point where we're going to deplete
our capital reserve.
Would you, Dr. Thornton, suggest that we do a hiring freeze again like we did last year, because that helped us keep things under control?
I think I'll definitely a consideration as of tonight, August 26th. I'm not there yet to say that to you, but those kinds of thoughts have crossed my mind. And in talking with Ned, I have entertained and talked about at what point will we consider that freeze to happen. Is it, Thanksgiving? Is it Halloween? Certainly, it is on my mind almost every day as far as when we have that conversation. As of tonight, I would say no, but certainly, yes, we're going to be having that conversation.
And to follow that as well, obviously, I don't remember when, but sometime within the last 4 years, we also did a spending freeze to where all expenditures had to be approved by the superintendent. Do you think that would be beneficial?
Same conversation at the operationally only on day one, so certainly not yet, but absolutely, once again, in the fall, we're going to have this conversation very early, probably earlier than in past years.
Okay. And you will bring it to us when it's time for us to do that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Janice, I would suggest that there's no exception from the committee that we move a discussion of the capital plan to the agenda and understand what that bonding might look like and what those implications are. I mean, I don't know if anyone else is concerned, but we're under $1 million out of a fund that used to be up around the $4 million mark. If something happens, we're not ready for it.
Then on the next agenda.
I think it's a legitimate discussion if there's no objection.
Also included in that request that he asked for, that we have a complete accounting of the disbursement of the money that we have to pay back to the State Department of Education, and what is the balance and when was it paid. I think that's very important, because the money that we had to pay them was no small sum.
Okay. All right.
And let's learn if it's paid, and
We'll
when
check
it was
on that.
paid, and who it was paid by, and who it was approved to pay it.
Okay, Renee and then Larry.
Regarding the capital projects, we don't have that report in front of us. What are some of the major expenditures that are putting it up to that? I know you don't know every single thing, but what are some of the projects that are putting it up to that high number?
For instance, the roofing projects we're wrapping up now, those are in the order of $400,000, just under that.
But we're wrapping it up, so has it been paid for yet? Or that's coming out of that million that's in that capital?
That's coming out of the million. A portion of that has been paid. That's the completed and stored to date has been paid. We still have a balance due on that. The security, I'd say we paid about 60% of that bill. That was $100,000. The Davis Villa playground was approximately $40,000. Those have been completed this year. And then we have similar type projects ahead of us. We have some heating system improvements that would be at for middle school, and some other items. Now, some of those items are included in the remaining bond funds if the town will go out for additional bonding. Now, because of the amount of money we're looking for in the $1 million range, it can get a little bit expensive relative to the amount of money we need. But those are some of the projects we're using the money for this year, and then next year what we anticipate.
Larry, then Mel.
If there's no further discussion on that agenda topic, I'm going to make a motion to approve.
I'll second. Just a minute. Mel, did you have anything on that?
I had my hand up, committee.
Go ahead.
For a question for you. Did I understand you to say that the town was going out for bonding?
The town would need to seek funds for the remaining bond balance on the $9 million bond. At present, they only went out for $7 million of the $9 million.
Another question related to that. I'm sorry, Mr. Cerisi, but I have to have an understanding of this.
Right ahead, Mrs. Spencer.
There's been a lot of discussion back and forth about a bond that we had out for repairs for school that was used in Dibble for other things. And I was always on the side that what you put a bond out for, what the citizens vote for it to be, that's what you have to use it for. do we have any money left in that particular bond?
Yes, there's approximately $2 million in that bond.
$2 million in that bond. And the specific writing of that bond was for the repair of what schools? I don't have the bond here with me now.
The bond included the 4 elementary schools that the work was completed on last summer, as well as Wickford Elementary.
Not quite okay, because I'm not getting the... Maybe I'm not asking the right questions. I think it was Pastor said you can get a good answer if you ask the right questions, so I'll ask you the questions. I'm not an engineer, but we'll have a discussion about that, because I'd like to see what that bond money was used for. Was it used specifically for those projects? Could you get me a sheet of that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Like Mel, I'm kind of confused on what you're saying here. It's that particular bond she's talking about is the one you're saying the town is going out to seek bonds.
They are not.
They are not.
They have not been requested by us to seek additional bond funds. It's my understanding the direction from the committee is not to access those funds at this time.
So then what bond is the town going out for?
They are not.
Well, I thought you just said they were.
No, the only money that we have available to us to do capital projects is the capital reserve fund money, which we are currently in the process of spending, and the bond capacity, which the town would have to go after. It's like having an account. They have to go out and access that account and get more money. So they'd have to go out on the bond market and acquire more funds for us to do additional work with that money. So we have the capacity to use that funds, but right now I do not have the direction from the school committee to go out and ask the town to do that.
And before they go ask for that, we will identify what projects we want that $2 million to go towards.
Correct.
Okay.
And related, is it okay? When you speak up and say that we have a balance of $2 million and we have to direct what, have we written a letter to the town asking them to get approval from the legislature to change that money? Because it will remain there, and I will hold to this point until we ask for a change, because it was voted on for a specific purpose. Now, I was reading in the paper last week, even though they're not in session, I think it was Cherry Hill or one of those schools down that way, that they changed, they got approval to change what some bond money was being used for. Because you stated in your earlier comments about collections, and there's nothing in the world going to tell me that tax collections are not going to be down in North Kingstown, because we are having hard times. People are out of work, and I think it's about 6 years before they can put your house on the market if you don't pay your tax. So some of those things related to finances we want to use, and this, that, and the other, maybe they should be presented to the attorney and we look at them in depth before we go try to use those monies and make plans for other things, because capital improvement money for years has been switched from one account to the other, and we're just going to have to get out of that practice.
Thank you, Mel.
Kim?
I don't want to belabor this, but I think, Mr. Draper, you've told us before that we've gotten approval from RIDE to use this money on certain schools that are open. We just can't use this bond money on any school that does not currently house students. Am I correct?
Correct. The occupancy of students is one of the litmus tests they provide, and the other is that they gave us a single approval, which they summarized back to us in a letter, and it dealt with just, I believe it's 4 schools.
So RIDE has given us the approval. The only reason we're not using the $2 million is because we, as a school committee, have not acted on that then.
Yeah, I will need the school committee's direction before I could go to the town.
Okay, I'm just making sure that that's clarified for the record. Thank you.
One final question, I promise, real quick. For the agenda item when we discussed CIP net, it would be great if, we need to run a number earlier, that there's a bonding need of about $5 million. I'm not sure what that means, but if there's a plan associated with that, buildings, specific issues, it would be great to see that detail. And if there are schools that are named in the remainder of that of the $9 million bond, that $2 million that would cover, and there are capital projects slated for those schools, it would be great to understand that. So if you know it's approved, so we can get beyond this, because we've had this conversation over and over, it'd be great to understand what our options are, what the numbers look like, what we can do. Thank you.
April, did you have a chance to
We need to
comment?
move on. We'll do this later.
So do we have
I made
a motion? Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We will now go to F1. Mel?
The question I had about F1, I asked Mr. Draper during the break, and it was concerning the heating and fire suppression system, and that is strictly for the high school. Am I correct, Mr. Draper?
That's correct.
And my main concern was that we didn't have but one bid. And the reason he explained to me, and I think that's something that we should bear in mind, the reason we don't have but one bid, the person who was the architect for the high school put this company in the contract. This company is not a dual part company. You know, you can buy a Sears washer and go to Walmart and make some holes to fix it. We have to have their work. And number two, why, after 5 years with inflation, they're not going up a little? That flagged me when I saw it, and I don't intend to go back and drag over everything that we've had concerning the building of the new high school. But my concern is, we're going to give them a contract for 5 years, and it doesn't go up 1 cent. He can explain to the audience and the rest of the committee who had that concern, but it is telling us something. These one provider contracts, it wasn't our fault. But big doom doubles, like the citizens are home with up at high school, which is not Mr. Draper's fault, we are going to have to look at things more closely. And there's nothing we can do but take this, because if somebody else wants the parts, they'd have to buy it from this company, and they would oversell it. And just to sit here and say, well, let's move on, so-and-so, I imagine the school committees in years past did that, but we're going to have to go over things more thoroughly, because we got a 5-year contract coming up here.
Okay, so you just want to bring that to our attention now?
Yes, and he can explain it to the audience, what he told me about it. But I did some research on it, and this company is not even in the state of Rhode Island. But we are hooked with them, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Renee?
Make a motion to approve F1.
I hadn't finished my comments, because I think they're very important to the citizens and us
I'll second it.
on the F1.
Okay, now what else would you like to say on that?
I would like to say that any contracts going out, not this, but we must be more diligent about it. We didn't do it, the school committee passed, but here we are stuck with something that only one man can fix.
Okay, noted, all right. We have a motion, we have it seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion passes. Thank you. F2, interscholastic athletic equipment, Doug and Kim.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify, Mr. Draper, that on F2, there are various asterisks by some of the items that are on here, but we're actually going by the lowest price. Am I correct? It's not necessarily the item that is with the asterisk that we're going by. We are going by the lowest price on the interscholastic bids.
That is correct. However, I have not had a chance to speak to Ev Quinn. She was out yesterday and today. I do know, as we had discussed, I do know that we have done a requisition for Medikinen for the items that I know are lower cost as compared to the other bidders. So I can say for sure that it has been done relative to that provider. I don't know if in all instances the quality is the same, but I know our intent is it's going to be the lowest priced item. And that's how we've acted so far to this point. I don't know if there's any items in this entire list that might, be an exception. I can't say that 100% for sure, but by and large, it's going to be the lowest price item.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Larry?
I think the question or the point that was made, and I'm not sure who made the point earlier on, was it isn't so much the lowest bid, but what name brand product are we putting out for bid? In other words, is there a less expensive, adequate or equal of quality name brand of product? Because if we're putting out for bid one name brand product, and then we're saying what's the lowest bid for product A, I don't think that's the question or the concern. I think the concern is what product are we putting out for bid? Can we have equal value or lesser value products that are of equal quality and put out for bid? And I think, for me personally, I think my concern is that we're spending X amount of dollars on top of the line uniforms and equipment on one sport, and then we're telling other sports that we don't have any money left for your uniforms. So I think my question or concern is the equality across the board for the approved athletic teams. Equality in the way that we expend the athletic budgeted dollars for these sports. Who is making those decisions? Who's saying sport X gets $5,000 and sport Z gets $0? Some teams don't even have uniforms, and I know the parents are purchasing uniforms, but on other teams we're buying them whatever name brand. I don't know anything about this stuff, but maybe we should, I'm a little bit concerned, and we approve a budget. Within that budget is an athletic budget or an IT budget or a special education budget. I'm a little bit concerned with, and we've talked about this during the budget process, I'm a little bit concerned with the details in the athletic portion of the budget. Where is that money being spent? There is no details in our budget on how much is being spent on each team. It's just basically an equipment purchase. We don't know what teams the equipments are being purchased for. I'd like to see that. I'd like to make sure that all the teams are being treated fairly. And believe me, there's no intention here to cut money from the athletic budget or cut money from one team and give it to another. I want to see all the teams and all the children being treated equally. I think it's very unfair that our taxpayers are funding this budget, and parents of one student that plays a sport, their uniforms are bought, and parents of another student of a sport, they got to go out to the store and spend a couple $100 out of their pocket for a uniform. It's just, who is making these decisions? And I don't think one person should have the authority to make the decision on how much we're going to spend on each sport. I think we need to have a discussion on that.
Okay, then Renee.
Thank you. A good analogy to what Larry's talking about is what you just talked about in F1. You bought an Apogee system by Siemens, and the only guys that can fix the Apogee system is Siemens. So, if you specify a particular type of product, and if you look at that spreadsheet, it looks like the asterisks in those columns stand for as specified. So, in my mind, I would question whether that was low cost. That's as specified. So it's actually what was spec'd, that's the vendor. How the spec was written is very important on how you can put out a bid, as you know. So, Larry makes some valid points there, so you really should look at that. As far as teams go, obviously football is going to cost more to run, and teams with more equipment cost more to run. But from the standpoint of what this tells me is that you basically bought the spec'd piece of equipment or piece of garment, And I don't know whether it's low cost, the way this is worded. So, you're into that same F1 thing, again, that we just talked about, so you should look at that.
Renee?
Mr. Shreese, if you don't mind, what sports were told they couldn't have a new uniform and the other ones did, and which sports have to purchase their own
I
uniform?
believe, is it the track team? We talked about this before. The volleyball team, they couldn't purchase volleyballs for the volleyball team. They had to go out and buy their own volleyballs.
That's on here as a purchase.
This year it is, but last year it wasn't. I know April knows a little bit more about the details than I do. And I'll give you another example. North Kingstown Olympian, whether it be first Olympian, very proud moment for the town, for the state, for the whole school district. Swimming team. They get $0 from the athletic budget.
Because we did not approve that.
Well, we can go back and forth on it. My point is,
Just so you understand why they don't get funding, that was approved by the school committee to not give funding.
my
to
point
each
is
one.
I want to see the students treated equally. I want to see the sports, the approved sports, as I mentioned. Thank you for clarifying that. I want to.
That's not the point.
That's not the point.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. We're trying to have a conversation here and work together. I want to continue on with my comments. I want to see the children and the athletes treated equally. I want to see the sports treated equally. As I said, why are we buying these high-priced uniforms for one team and another team, the parents are purchasing uniforms? That's my concern, equality. I know that's a foreign concept to some of you, but that's my concern.
Fine, thank you.
The issue is equity, not equality. Sports, football is going to be more expensive. So if you're going to look to split it and go, we can do that. Mrs. Cochran makes a great point. There are sports that have been identified by the school committee, past, present, that fit different designations. Swim team is one of them. If we want to talk equality, then let's bring it up for a question and decide whether we want to fund the swim team.
Let's go back to the agenda item, and does anyone
I'm on
have...
this agenda, I actually exempted it. I just want to, hopefully, I get my comments out too here.
Okay.
I think you make great points about the vendor selection here and whether we've kind of shoehorned ourselves into a commitment on specific equipment. And I think that, and the question I just had when I exempted it is, did we bid? Did we look at, what kind of jersey we're purchasing? Did we go to other vendors? It looks like Greg and Marciano got the lion's share of this. And, was there another vendor in the process that competitively bid, and do we have that data to look at?
I can speak to questions I had for Athletic Director Kenyon relative to some of the different purchases that have come through, not only on this bid, but other things that have come through. Some of the things I ran into were relative to the MPA. For instance, the MPA carries baseballs, footballs, and some other things that meet standards that are required at the university level. Now, when I questioned Athletic Director Kenyon, why can't we purchase the MPA items, he said in some cases they don't meet interscholastic requirements or requirements that they have for some of the league play that they do at the high school level.
You talking about a ball doesn't meet interscholastic requirements? Is that what you said?
Correct. Is
Ball is a ball,
the
right?
specification, well, I guess there's different requirements for different pieces of equipment. And rather than, it's not really my place to specify to the athletic director what they will and will not have, because they're going to have the technical knowledge. I'm going to base what I do on what the athletic director tells me is his requirement. I can't speak to the specifications and what will or will not work in the particular sport. That's what I rely upon the director to do.
We could look to a bidding process, right? Specs of the ball exist, but requests for proposal could go out to multiple vendors, and you could look at it and see that we've done the due diligence to get the low-cost vendor.
Well, based on this conversation, I can speak to the bidding process. The bidding process and our specifications were followed. So we've done legally what we're supposed to do through a bidding process. Now, relative to the qualitative questions you're asking, I would have to defer to the athletic director, because it's not my place to tell the director what the specifications, no more than it would be my place to advise the superintendent, you shouldn't do this kind of curriculum, you should do a different type of curriculum. The superintendent is going to tell me what the educational focus is going to be, and I would also defer to the athletic director for athletic issues.
Okay. Now.
You're absolutely... April was first.
Sorry.
And looking through this, I just had questions in regarding some uniforms. I didn't see any uniforms for wrestling or girls or boys volleyball. And I know in the past that the wrestling team was so short on uniforms, they had to share singlets. And we had to get money from the NK5K to buy
even take them home.
and wash them. And she had to take them home, and her son was on there. It was disgusting. And I have some concerns, and that's kind of like, I think, somewhat...
So perhaps we need some further clarification on this.
You know, we used to have like in curriculum, we would have like a book cycle. And we knew that, you know, we have some information
Share one
as to...
thing.
You know, to make sure that through the cycle of time that all teams can get their uniforms, or maybe it's just in the format of a presentation. One question I had was turtlenecks, black, 36. They're, you know, ranging anywhere from $13 to $15 for turtlenecks. It doesn't say what sport. We're looking at, you know, over $500. So I just, you know, because I guess it's because times are so tough, and we're going to go through some really hard things that, you know, we're starting to look at things closer.
It's a pleasure, committee. Kim?
I'm going to make a motion to pass F2 with this stipulation that, I don't know if anybody will want to give me a second, but I think that everybody's right here in that we probably would like to have a little bit more clarification. I'm concerned that as we get school started, that we won't be able to have some, I guess this is a question to Mr. Draper.
Purchase uniforms.
Right, they need to purchase uniforms as we are getting our sports season start. So I don't want the students to be impeded because we've basically said, no, we're not going to buy this. But I think from what it sounds like, we would like to have a little bit more information in that perhaps not this year can we change the bidding process, but for next year we just definitely want a little more information as to making sure that if things are really on the lowest bid, that we are not building our specs up such as that we can only have one type of suit when maybe a comparable suit would be just as good. So I guess that's the concern that I hear from our school committee is not necessarily the bids, because as you said, that's been legal, but it's the specs that brought about the bids. And so that's where we would like further clarification, and that would be something we would look to maybe revising. Not necessarily only for next year, but I imagine we'll have other athletic purchases during the year, so that would be exactly when we would want to have further clarification on that.
I'll second her motion. I'm not sure the exact wording, but I like what she said.
Yeah, I know, it was just, my motion would be to accept...
have to rephrase it.
My motion was to accept F2. However, then that's where I added the caveat, and that's not really part of the motion, but that would be the caveat that I would bring to the committee.
I would have a question in terms of bidding. We know what the bidding process is, but if we do stipulate a specific brand without looking at comparable, then in some respects the bidding process is actually not really a full bidding process. So I would question whether or not the bidding process is actually being followed in that way. So what you're looking at here is not necessarily having more details, but more making sure that the bidding process is being followed so that when we're purchasing an item, it's an item with comparable criteria that we're looking at and purchasing and not name brand.
Right, so we're saying a football jersey, you're not saying the name, like we're not buying a bid for Nike football jerseys, it's just boom, football jerseys.
That's what
And then we need a bid for Nike, Under Armour, and all the sporting people and say,
And everything,
yeah,
And that's where your
Same
specs come in.
right.
So, do you have a discussion, or you just as a second? We have a second here. So we're in discussion.
Just one quick comment. Kim makes an excellent analogy and a good point as far as the concern with holding up the purchase of some equipment. I would think that to hold this up for 2 weeks until our next school committee meeting, and when it's just coming to us for the first time tonight, this bid is coming to us for the first time tonight, to hold it up for another 2 weeks until our next meeting shouldn't be an issue. And, you know, we've had similar discussions about these purchases and detail and bid specs and so on and so forth. And we approve them, and then we look for more information or more specifics the next time around. I can tell you the only way, and this isn't disparaging to any individual, but just overall bidding process and budgetary process, the only way you're going to get more detail is to withhold the funding. You keep approving it and telling us, get back to us next year.
Thank you.
That's not good business practice, that's not good fiscal practice, so I can't support approving the funding without further detail and without some clarification on the bidding process that took place here. Thank you.
So, just if we go that route of delaying the approval, what happens to fall sports equipment usage? Does the football team not get the pants, jerseys, game socks, helmets that they need?
I can't speak to which specific items will impact the sports.
Of course.
I think they've already been ordered.
Whatever we can order within the purchasing regulations, we've ordered.
Okay, have we taken delivery of this?
The first football game is soon. And
I guess it's simple.
the first football team is Friday night.
Yeah.
We've taken delivery on most of this, right?
They're not naked.
So, I mean, you're going to delay approval for something we've already got.
No,
That doesn't.
I'm just asking the questions.
No, I understand. I want the committee to be aware. Those items that met the purchasing regulations that we knew we needed right away, we ordered within our purchasing regulations. However, some of these items would push us over the $5,000, and that's what the bid process is for.
So as long as it stays under $5,000, you can go ahead and order it.
Yeah, for instance,
So keep it under.
the Medi-Keenan items, there weren't that many items, and I want to say, and this is just off the top of my head, I don't have the exact detail, but let's say it's in the order of $500. Well, we have comparative prices